All right, well, welcome everybody. It's really, really lovely to have you. And we appreciate you being here to learn a little bit more about our HR and talent acquisition and management journey to Israel with the wonderful China, Gorman and Gerry Crispin. Thank you both so much for being leaders for over 10 years now, and so many wonderful memories. But today we're going to cover a little bit of an overview of the itinerary. We're going to hear from China and Gerry about their past experiences and how impactful that's been, not only for them, but for the participants, the delegates that are traveling with you, and also the people you meet along the way. I think one of the wonderful things that we get to witness and enjoy is that sharing of knowledge, that network enhancement, and all of those wonderful things. So we'll chat a little bit about the benefits of travel. Who is Nanda Journeys? Several of you attending today are probably familiar, but some of you are probably not familiar. So we'll spend a short time on that. We'll talk about past delegation highlights, always fascinating for me. We could spend an hour on that alone. Yeah. And of course, at the end, we'll do a little wrap up for how to register if this particular delegation is of interest to our guests today, and time for questions. Right. I love this picture. It's one of my best favorite pictures. So I think China, where was this picture?
This was Japan. This was our forming meeting in Japan. As we take these journeys, we all, come from different places. And so we arranged to, in the hotel we're staying, and the hotels are lovely, by the way. We have a sort of a forming meeting where we meet our on the ground guide. We meet each other. We go over the agenda. We answer any questions. And we just usually it's before dinner on our landing day, and we sort of get to know each other. Usually the people on our journeys know either me or Gerry, or we're connected, in some way. But not everybody knows everybody else. And so we spend a little bit of time, just sort of forming and norming and going over the agenda and where are we going to be when, and if our delegation is large enough and we have guests, so that we're running sort of two agendas, the professional agenda and then the guest agenda, which is more focused on cultural events, cultural visits, museums, and those kinds of things. We sort of talk through all of those logistics and when are we going to be together and when are we not. So it's that first meeting is a wonderful thing, and we're bleary-eyed from global travel, but ready to get on with it. It's super fun. And
so Gerry, do you remember what was said here? I mean, those smiles are just like fantastic. Does anybody remember?
I do.
Somehow I'm not sure if that was at the first meeting or if it was at the we spoke in Japan with a group of older gentlemen who were heads of HR and heads of professional association in Japan.
Yeah, it was a SHRM type of
organization.
And I think I think they were saying something about how they viewed HR that was quite different from our perspective. And I kind of looked at China and she looked at me, and we just broke up because it was like, are you crazy? But you're not going to do that. You're not going to say that for sure. You're going to try and listen respectfully and better understand what's going on. But it was like an eye opener that the world is so different and unexpected in how people make assumptions about what we think are normal ways that we do business, but that in some countries it's really different.
Absolutely, and I think
that's stimulating. It's really extraordinary.
Yeah. And I think that's the power of travel. No matter where you're going or what professional focus you have, the power of that cultural understanding and starting to really have knowledge and personalized experiences that really connect you to the culture. I think that's always fascinating for me.
The most powerful thing for me is when we're traveling, you know, in Japan, in India, in Cuba, wherever we're traveling, we're immediately, and anybody who's traveled, as most of the people on this call have, you're immediately sort of assaulted with the differences. It's language, it's food, it's architecture. As we focus in on the practice of HR and talent acquisition, it's, you know, professional practices. But the thing that always happens on these trips, and if you travel professionally globally anyway, you probably come to this point time and time again, is immediately you're kind of, wow, this is so different. But as our time goes on, what we begin to really see are not just the differences, but the similarities, right? And that becomes super powerful and frankly, super inspiring.
Yeah, and lifelong friends, right? I mean, you connect with people that you're still in touch with from what was 10 years ago. You were in India, maybe, I think, and I know you're still in touch with folks. From there. That's fascinating. So of course we don't have a delegation picture of you guys in Israel, so I had to show you my delegation picture in Israel, but we'll have one of you soon. We have lots of other pictures to share here shortly, but I thought we'd chat a little bit about, you know, why Israel? I was there with a group earlier this year on a cultural exchange and immersion opportunity. So I would love to hear from you both. Gerry, why do you think Israel is an important place to visit for HR and talent acquisition right now? What are you most excited about?
Well, it's the nation that's focused in on startups. So, you know, there's this whole startup nation experience around it. Plus, many other startups within the United States have a position in Israel. You know, it's a unique culture that's very successful from a business perspective. Many of the folks who have HR startups from Israel have penetrated into the US market. There's a lot of welcoming in terms of those issues. And yet there's so much more that we can better understand about how they incentivize folks for work. You know, obviously people go into the service right from high school. So fundamentally, there's a difference in terms of how education takes place there, and then beyond that, how that takes place, and to be able to meet with ministers to better understand some of the policies, some of the startups that we plan to talk to, and other aspects of our trip. It's really one of the ones that we haven't touched. I have been to Israel for a short time. I'm really looking forward to going back again and experiencing some of the same tourist things like Jerusalem, but also there are others that I know we have on our agenda that will be kind of cool too, that I have not had when I was there earlier.
Awesome. That's great. How about you, China?
Well, the startup nature just is fascinating to me. And one of the things that I really enjoy about these trips is when we meet with policymakers, whether that's government officials or others. Those meetings just really are so fascinating to me. I'm not a politician at all, but the politics of the world are fascinating to me. So Gerry talked about meeting with the Minister of Propaganda in Cuba. We had fascinating conversations with a lower level but very senior official in Japan around their issues. Their workforce is aging rapidly. It's hard for people in other countries to come in, and they are working through a talent shortage, sort of like we are now, except that what their answer is to get women into the workforce. That was fascinating to me, because in Japan, previously, and probably still today, women could work, but when they married and started having a family, they were gone from the economy. And so instead of thinking about bringing in talent from other countries, their focus was on engaging the women of Japan to begin to fill some of those gaps. So we also had a fascinating conversation in Prague at the US Embassy around talent and migration and, bringing talent in from other countries and that kind of thing. Fascinating. So the pieces that sort of really resonate with me are I use the word political, but I don't mean politics like Democrats and Republicans, but really the political aspects of how do you ensure that your nation has the talent and the skills that they need to power their economy forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for sharing that. And we could spend an hour just talking about all of that. So I'd just like to introduce myself just very briefly here. And Nanda Journeys has been in partnership, again, with China and Gerry for a very long time. But I started Nanda Journeys in 2015 after a lifelong career in travel, starting out in the UK and the northwest of England. And that opportunity afforded me the great transformative move to California with my family, very young family at the time. And I've stayed in travel my whole life. When the corporate organization I worked for closed in 2015, I put on my big girl pants, as I tell everybody, and decided to start Nanda Journeys because I believed in the transformative nature of these kinds of programs and just really wanted to keep them going. So thank you both for your partnership. So glad we're still here at Nanda Journeys. So our tagline is travel for people with purpose and passion. And I think as our conversation evolves today, I'm hopeful that comes through. And for our guests today, please know that what's important to me is you and the people connections that we are able to generate as we travel.
Cool. I will say that, one of the enjoyments that we've had in our relationship over the years is that it really you take over all of the logistical kinds of things that just drive most people nuts. So it makes it a lot easier to just show up at the airport, and then we are transformed into another place and everything is taken care of. I don't have to think. All of those things are taken care of. So I do appreciate that in an extraordinary way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And one of the really strengths that Nanda Journey provides are the on the ground guides that get assigned to our delegation. So we have two. We have a bus driver, and then because we go from place to place, we have an on the ground guide who is with us every step of the way, handles sort of last minute things. One of my favorite memories, and this is such a girly thing, but we had a professional meeting cancellation in Singapore. And I said to our guide, gee, wouldn't it be cool if we could do high tea at the Raffles Hotel, world famous upper crust, amazing, 150-year-old upper crust hotel. And the guy said, oh, there's no possible way we can do that. And he said, those get booked up, months and months in advance. And I kept pressing him, would you call, could you try, would you? And between the guide and his employer and the luck of timing, we got to have high tea at the Raffles Hotel, which is still a standout sort of experience in my travel. But
and we saw the pictures.
Yeah, our guides are bond with us. They become our friends. They can answer cultural questions. They get us where we need to go on time. It really takes all of the, as Gerry said, the logistical stuff off of us so that we can all just really enjoy just an amazing cultural experience.
I love that. That's fantastic. So let's talk a little more about past experiences and why, for our guests that are joining us today. And again, I'm so sorry we can't interact here, but why travel on a journey like this? We've highlighted a couple of things here, and I have my favorites. But Gerry, what do you think is important, and why travel on a program like this versus a conference or, not traveling at all?
What makes this very different for me is it's kind of an immersive self-education kind of an approach. The fact is when we're traveling with 15, 20 people who have or share some of your worldview, if you will, of human resources and its importance, or talent acquisition and its importance. We go into these interesting kind of meetings, as well as tourist kinds of things that take place. And what I find is that what I see and observe and can capture is always contrasted with my peers and colleagues who see it slightly different. They have a slightly different view. Yeah. And I find that absolutely a fascinating point of learning. So being able to go step outside your box, being able to think about recruiting in another culture, think about how HR is performed in another culture, and then hear your peers and colleagues talk about their experience of the same event, if you will, which is different in how they see it, is it's a masterclass, literally, in stimulating you about the differences between the United States and other cultures. And I think it forces you to really rethink some of the things that we do, or confirm that some of the things we do are, extraordinarily valuable. I mean, it really is a real opportunity to have conversations you would not otherwise be able to have.
Yeah, with people you wouldn't be able to engage with. Rob just asked a question, would love to understand the work component, need to sell that for funding. Totally understand that. And this is one of the ones, a trip to Israel, because it is such a hotbed of HR technology startups, that if Rob or anybody, if you are thinking about adding technology components to talent acquisition, to any piece of the HR puzzle, we're going to be meeting with some of these startups, and some of these relationships you could in fact bring back. Doesn't mean you're going to buy on the spot or anything, but the knowledge of what startups are doing in various aspects of the practice of HR and talent acquisition, in this type of framework, you get a sense of what's coming, what's new, who's thinking way out there, and is that something you want to engage with, or does it ring any bells with what you're currently doing? So Rob, I think that might be part of the way to, I'm using air quotes here, I don't think you can see me, but to sell this, but just being able to, because a lot of the interactions we're going to have are with startups, having the ability to sit down with a founder, with a senior team, including a founder that has, developers in Israel, but they're selling it in California and Oklahoma, gives you a real sense of what's available, what's coming, and I think would let you expand maybe some of your thoughts about the kinds of purchases you're thinking about making, maybe give you some thoughts that you never had before about some of the solutions that may be out there. So just wanted to answer that directly, Rob.
Yeah, I think we will chat about this here shortly, Rob, also about approximately 15 to 20 hours of in-person professional engagements. And I know that's really important when you're presenting that to your organization, or justifying for yourself, if you have your own business, why this would be an appropriate spend. But we're going to meet with the vice president of Microsoft, for instance, and we'll chat about that. And Rob, I can send a follow-up to you so I can highlight in the itinerary all the professional elements of the program. So this is not just a little boondoggle, as we used to call it in England. I don't know if that's a term here or not.
Yeah,
Is
it
it a term? I don't know. It's very much professional forward first. And then, yes, of course, there are some cultural elements that you'll absolutely enjoy along the way. That it is tax deductible as a reasonable and necessary business expense because we have built it around professional development. We've built the program with Gerry, with China, with our in-country partners to provide an opportunity for professional engagement first, I think is something else.
Let me say, Michael asked, will this be strictly tech focused in startups, or will other industries like hospitality or healthcare be included? Michael, we're early enough in the process that we could pretty much include anything we want. And so if you have a abiding interest in hospitality, we can work on that, or healthcare. We can work to include some of those kinds of meetings on our agenda.
Yeah, it's a great point, China. So we obviously, of course, have always in our site some specific meetings that we're going to do, but we finalize that about 3 months out, right, before we travel, so that it speaks to the delegates that have joined and are participating. So we get bios from everybody, so we can really understand their core learning objectives, and that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up in terms of finessing the program.
Michael, I'll be honest with you that, you know, we're moving outside of, you know, where you are to things that you should stimulate you, so that if you're in healthcare, as I know you are, and hospitality, you can bring that back and think about that from that perspective. It's a different world for sure.
Yeah, so it's a great segue. Thanks for the question. And China, thank you for looking at the questions, because as I'm sharing my screen, difficult for me to see the questions because I'm sharing the PowerPoint here. So thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the planned itinerary, what we're going to do, what people can expect from the program. I, of course, am very excited about the cultural elements. Israel, I think, is a very misunderstood part of the world by some people, not by everybody necessarily, but immersing in the cultural and understanding, you know, the political, the religious, the cultural diversity that exists there. We hear one side of the story on the media. Being in a country and seeing it, feeling it, touching it, really understanding it is, I think, what I'm most excited about for you. And with that in mind, we'll take you to Tel Aviv. Just notice my little typo there. So take you to Tel Aviv, of course. So you'll start in Tel Aviv. It's a very cosmopolitan city. It's beachside. It's by the Mediterranean. But of course, we're going to go into Jerusalem as well. You'll have an opportunity to float in the Dead Sea, which is fascinating, by the way, and do cultural activities that connect you to the culture. So a cooking class for your group has always been a really kind of solidifying activity. Not only are you learning about culture and food, something that your group really enjoys, by the way, you're doing it together. And that's another opportunity for people to really, you know, converse, chat, engage. So we'll do some of the biblical sites too, of course, you know, the Wailing Wall and the Mount of Olives. So yes, there's cultural components, but that isn't why we're here today. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, some of the professional engagements and who we're going to meet with. China, maybe you can kick us off and highlight some of the things that are in the works now, but to our previous conversation, this will be modified and changed as we understand our delegation as a whole. 20 people.
Right. One of the beauties of working with Nicola and her team and the team on the ground is we, from the delegates and others, people that we know, we pull in contacts so that they can approach them and say, we've got this delegation of senior level HR leaders coming, and your organization, you know, popped up on their list of being desired. And it's the agenda, the professional agenda, as Nicola just said, gets built sort of 3-month-ish ahead of when we actually get there. And then there's fine tuning as we go. Sometimes at the last minute, somebody has to cancel and we can pull somebody else in, or we can swap out a cultural activity with another business meeting. We certainly did that in Tokyo. And so, Israel is a hotbed of startups in the HR tech field. So, we will take advantage of that as people sign up to come. If hospitality, Rob, is a huge, value for you, we can look at that. I remember one of our trips, was it Cuba, Gerry, where we actually met with the, oh, no. This was India. And we were in the hotel that had been bombed by terrorists. And this was like 10 years later. And we met with the general manager and the senior staff to talk about, from a people perspective, what that was like, what they did, how did they work with their employees, how did they get the hotel back and up and running, and those kinds of things. So we're able to, ye and ha all the way in terms of the organizations we target. We don't just leave it up to the people on the ground. We are able to say we want to meet with company A, company B, company C, and 2 companies in hospitality and 2 companies in healthcare. I mean, we can say that, and we'll be able to, not 100%, but we'll be able to accommodate those kinds of requests. We generally meet with more senior organizational people, CHROs, heads of talent acquisition. We make it and Gerry has made this, and I'll let you talk about this, but Gerry has made this a point that on our journeys, we meet with employers, we meet with senior government leaders, and we make sure that we are engaged for some time with an institution of higher learning. We meet with professors, we meet with graduate students, we meet with students one-on-one. We've had some really interesting sessions with graduate students who are thinking about international careers in HR and what can we share with them and what can they share with us. I'm remembering specifically the meetings that we had in Japan. Those were inspiring as all get out, and it lets us actually leave something of value behind. Those students wouldn't have access to Rob Dromgoole or Michael Goldberg or Robin Erickson, and here we are. And so it's a way for us to, be part of a local experience and not just taking, but giving back as well.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Gerry?
Yeah, when I look at the various pieces of what we do, what strikes me really is just an incredible opportunity to look at that culture's approach to what they're doing from how they energize an employee base to how they deal with candidates. We have, for example, I know, we actually have a whole host of connections in Israel that are chomping at the bit to be participating. So I know Athena Clark, for example, at Hired Score wants to host the meeting of a number of startups. And I know Gal Al-Mag, who is the founder of Talenya in there, and also knows an awful lot of these HR related startups, is very interested in supporting us and supplying those kinds of things. So we also have an economist in Israel who really studies and understands deeply how workforce planning takes place within that society. And so we might be able to get a lecture from her. So there's all these little pieces that we want to put together, and we know we can't do all of them. we can't be able to go to every biblical spot that's, important
Right.
in Israel. So it is a teaser for a week and a couple weekends on the outside of that. And potentially you'll want to go back, at some point in a whole different way. But the advantage is we're going with this concept of really trying to understand what's going on in a little bit more depth, in the areas that we care about, as well as get some sense of how this culture operates. So I love the fact that we have, based on what we were doing already, a relatively robust agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only going to improve on that as we swap in and swap out and add a couple of key places depending upon who joins us. And
exactly.
We're good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love as well that, one of the things that often comes up in this part of the world is the Palestinian-Israeli connection, and how does that work? Do they work together? Do they work alongside each other? Is that even possible? And we'll provide an opportunity for you to witness firsthand a factory where they're employing Israeli, Palestinian. You'll speak to the HR team about how do they bridge that gap in terms of what's happening outside of the workforce. How do they balance all of that? Because that's obviously a very topical conversation for the HR executives, is how do they manage that cultural difference? It exists every day. So I'm personally excited about that as the people person, right? Is how do you provide cultural understanding within Israel and navigate those complexities, and speak to a government workforce committee member too, who will explain a little bit more about how do they transition people from their years of service, Gerry, to your point earlier. Everybody does their service in Israel, and what does that look like? So super excited for the agenda. And thank you all for, helping to get us to this point. And we know we're going to finesse it so that it speaks to everybody that's on the delegation and allows them an opportunity to learn what they want to learn, quite frankly. So of course, the dates are important. Put them on your calendar, April 29th to May 7th of next year. We do stay in five-star hotels. Yes, we do use chain hotels sometimes, but typically at Nanda Journeys, we really try and support hotels that are boutique, independently owned, where the dollars stay local in the community. So one of the endeavors that we try and master behind the scenes is, as much as possible, can we ensure that our participation money stays locally, supports local, and allows cultural diversity to thrive, but financial independence too. So that's something we work on in the background. So we have packages from $5,999 that include or exclude airfare in a shared or single room basis. Happy to take those questions, set up another conversation with anybody that has those questions. But we have that flexibility because coming off of COVID, you all have points. I know you have points. You have, your preferred airlines that you might want to travel on. So we allow that flexibility in our packaging so that it works for you, our participants. So let me know what questions you have there.
Do you want to talk, Nicola, just a little bit about if we have guests, how the guest program works?
Yeah, great point, China. So this opportunity is available to people that are not in the HR talent acquisition field. And we have a cultural itinerary planned for your guests. So when you're in the meetings, when you're at the embassy or up to Tel Aviv University, your guests will be enjoying privately guided cultural activities. And then you meet up over lunch again or over dinner. And that itinerary detail is in the daily program and that we can share with people, that everybody has their dinners together, right? So you join together in the evening times, and that's really where the magic happens, right? All those ideas and networking and conversations and what I witnessed in Japan, as I mentioned earlier, will live with me forever. Seeing those relationships develop, those ideas develop, and then you taking those back to the States. And even today, I still hear you both saying, oh, I spoke to Angie and we met in Japan and now, we're connected, we're doing this together, we're doing that together. I think that's an unwritten benefit of traveling on these programs. And I think you've even had participants from other professions come in and join you because the learning and the magnifying of being with people in HR and talent acquisition has helped them in their profession, right? So I think that the power of connecting through passion, purpose, and just a desire to learn, your favorite thing, Gerry, your desire to learn and engage. I think that's what's really important.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I had my grandson with me in Japan. He was 17 at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Chris Hoyt was there as well, my business partner, and Angie, who's now pretty permanently in Greece, but building one of actually a pretty large staffing organizations, doing some amazing work.
Fantastic.
So those are some interesting characters that were with us.
The characters is the operative word for both Chris and Angie.
Oh, without a doubt.
No,
there was no fun had.
Yes,
not
no
to be
fun.
described here.
So I just wanted to share like a few of the highlights of what people have said. So like Chris said, he talks about his Japan experience still all the time and the professional learnings, but the relationships, were strengthened, and being with people on the bus as you're navigating to places over lunch, over a cooking class, over late night nightcaps. One of my favorite things with you guys is, it's so profound. And I just don't think you can plan for what that benefits.
One of the folks that was very supportive and worked very closely with Nanda was Recruit, which owns Indeed and owns Glassdoor.
Yeah.
And they were actually not only hosts in a couple different places, but they also supported one of our lunches at a pretty amazing place.
That's right.
So we've, as I said, China and I have a number of contacts that we work with Nanda to talk about, how they can be helpful to us in the locations that we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is at the U.S. Embassy in Prague,
in Prague, probably.
And Kathy shared with us, Kathy Claytor has joined us on many an occasion, I think, joined you on your delegations from Delta Dental. And what she says is it's life-changing. That's what stood out for me when I chatted with her. And she said she loves being able to connect with thought leaders, right? And yes, in her space, but in other areas and other walks of life. And I appreciate Kathy saying we do an exceptional job. Thank you, Kathy. We love it. It's easy when you do what you love, I think. And Dr. David Miles, I believe David's joined you on many delegations also.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, he's the chairman of Lahane and Execs, and now he's a in-residence executive at a Northern Arizona University, I think. He's been doing that for a couple of years.
He's all over the place, but he is also an extraordinary collector of automobiles and a former head of HR for Hilton.
Yeah.
In the past.
Yeah. He's a wonderful man also. And I consider him a friend at this point too. We stay connected. So, that's the other power of these journeys. So from David's perspective, the thing that stood out for me was that he comes back with an enhanced understanding of global perspectives of business. But the world's getting smaller these days, right? We're all interconnected, whether we're on the same continent or not. We really all have to have a baseline understanding of global culture and how we can collaborate together. So that was fascinating from David. And then Jo Weech, I know this was life-changing for Jo when she was in Japan in more ways than one, given her cultural heritage. And she said the learning, the laughter, the friendship building, it created magical memories. So as you can see here, we do like to get into the local culture.
Yeah, I just had dinner with her last week, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. How's she doing?
She's doing just fine.
Fantastic.
That's great.
So let's just chat just a little bit about how you participate in the journey. We're connected at this point, and everybody on the call will follow up and send, of course, a thank you for being here, but also the recording of the webinar. There is a $500 non-refundable deposit for the program. In the unlikely event we don't have enough people, we'll pretty much already have enough people registered already for this journey. You would be refunded that money, of course, but that is required at registration. We have monthly installment plans for you. As I mentioned earlier, packages including or excluding flights. You must have a passport valid for 6 months. If you do not currently have a valid passport, apply now. It's taking a while to get passports. But in November, actually, just as an aside, the U.S. State Department is opening up electronic applications for passport renewal. So that should be a much swifter, faster process.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. And space is limited to 20 professional participants from the US. Obviously, we'll engage with lots of other people in Israel. That the three of us have determined that 20 is a great number.
Perfect.
You know, it allows it to be intimate. It allows there to be diversity, different personalities, different learning opportunities, but anything beyond that, and we can't do those niche, nuanced, really getting local if we're any bigger than that. So we do strictly limit it to 20 participants.
Yeah, if nothing else, it's kind of the size of a conference room that we can kind of squeeze into when we're visiting somebody. So there's been times that it's been pretty tight. Yeah. And we don't want to ignore some of those smaller organizations that we can learn a hell of a lot from.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
This is a picture of our last trip to Singapore, which was fabulous, so fabulous. And this was just an amazing group of people. Many of us had traveled together before, David, Joanna, Chris Avrilla, but we had some new folks, and one of them, and you mentioned this earlier, the woman standing next to Gerry, owns
Darlene?
Yes, owns a couple of funeral parlors in New England. She was a hoot, and she was actually going to do the guest visit, but she was so interested in our conversations that she decided to come with us on all the professional meetings, and she participated fully. She was super fun, and so we have a focus, a professional focus in HR and talent acquisition. But if somebody wants to come with us, is dying to go to Israel, and there's any kind of, we can talk and sort of vet them a little bit. And if they seem like they'd be fun, and if they seem like, they'd be interesting for the rest of us, we're happy to have others come along. But that was a good example of somebody who is, I mean, she dealt with dead people, not live people, but but families as well, and that kind of. She was just a great addition, I thought, to our trip.
And she still talks about it to this day. She emailed me yesterday. She's considering where she's going to go next year. She said, "Please say hello to China and Gerry for me, and let them know." Yeah. What she said was profound, actually, because she said, okay, it might not seem interesting to other people, like I own funeral homes, but what's important to me when I travel is understanding different culture, because how I deal with the families and how I support and navigate different culture is really important in my work. So understanding that and seeing it from a different perspective, I'm like, wow, we just don't think about these things.
And obviously, for those of you who don't know, Rob Dromgoole, who's been on this call, is the head of TA for Choctaw Nation. So if anybody has a slightly different culture to deal with in this country, it's him.
It would be Rob.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we will open it up to questions. Again, my apologies to those that are joining us today that we can't do the interactive. I think you can see us, but we can't see you. So we will open the chat, though, if you do have any questions. Of course, follow up with Gerry, follow up with China. We are connected at Nando, of course, and you can connect with me. But are there any questions for right now?
We've answered a couple, and I don't know if everybody can see these. We talked about the healthcare and hospitality potential. Robin asked and this is a great question, are there a lot of additional expenses? And I answered, not many. The hotel is, all of the excursions are part of it. We generally have a couple of evenings on our own for dinner. And so we kind of split up into groups, and our guide helps us with reservations and that kind of thing. With a smaller group, we generally sort of all go together. In a bigger group, we might get, into groups of 6 or something like that.
We do tip the folks that have supported us, the guide and bus driver. It's not a huge amount of money,
It's like
so
being on a cruise.
It's pretty all inclusive. I think to make sure that what that is, I would reach out to Nicola in relation to that. But obviously it's somewhere between 6 and 7. Just given in general from that point of view to make this happen. And the reality is, I doubt you could do what we do, or even close for that within the framework.
Yeah.
I
Anybody who's traveled globally will understand immediately the incredible value of the price of this delegation and this experience versus setting it all up on your own. Frankly, I don't think anybody could set it up on their own for the kinds of professional development meetings that we have, the cultural things, plus the hotels, plus the airfare, plus the food. We just couldn't. We probably couldn't do it for $10,000.
And if we weren't a collective that did this, we wouldn't be able to get the kind of opportunity to meet with these CHROs from Microsoft, or a minister from in Israel, et cetera, or get an opportunity to have a meeting at the American Embassy and talk a little bit about their perspective of what's happening and where it's going. Those insights, I think, if you came back and talked to your businesses about them, would blow their mind.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Michael just asked about Shabbat dinner on the Friday. We have done those. We've done meals in people's homes. So I can't see the daily itinerary just at this moment, Michael, but I will take a look and a peek and see what we're doing on Friday. We have done that for our guests in the past. Absolutely. It's a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're welcome. It's so important to me to try and provide an opportunity for you to see all angles and all ways of life. So that's the dinners, or we give consideration to the dinners to provide that opportunity to see that out of the daily activities. So I'll look into that, Michael, and follow up with you directly on that.
Cool.
I think we'd all be.
Yeah, if the days work, that would be awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much both for being here, China, Gerry.
Of course.
I could chat for hours, and I think I shared with you on a personal level how nervous I am about these kinds of engagements, and you have just been delightful and calmed all of my nerves. So thank you. And for our guests on the call, thank you so much for coming and spending this time with us to learn a little bit more about this opportunity to join Gerry and China and Israel. I truly hope you'll be able to make it. It is profound. It is life-changing. If I could go on every one of your delegations, I'd be there in a heartbeat. But I'm going to be in Greece, I think, when you guys are going to be in Israel. So thank you both. It goes beyond saying that I value your friendship. And that's what we are at NANDA. We're friends. It's not about corporate first. It's about friends first. Everything else follows. And I really appreciate you.
Cool. Thank you. We appreciate you.
We appreciate you for sure. For sure.
Right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We'll follow up directly. I'm just going to check if there are any last minute questions.
And you're going to supply a link to the recording at the end of this?
Yep, we'll send that along, both for the folks that were with us today and also the folks that weren't able to make it because of their schedules.
Sure.
And maybe if there are other topics that people would like us to visit, now that I'm over my nerves, we can do it again.
Cool.
That's a
it's a good podcast. And so send it out. I will try to promote that a little bit to folks who might not have been able to come.
Yes,
Awesome.
I will as well. Thank you for putting this together, Nicola. It's always wonderful to, even if we're not in the same room, but to see you and see your smile and your enthusiasm for what we're trying to put together here. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everybody. And now I'm going to go get my glass of wine, Gerry. My turn.
There you go.